Hi everyone, and welcome to this conversation today. It's a bit of a collaboration between LiveTiles and our Strategic Partner Swinburne University as part of the Victorian Digital Innovation Festival. Today, I'll be talking with my guests about the future of the physical workplace, what the recent rapid acceleration of digital transformation due to COVID means long term, and what sort of skills my guests think that will be needed now that the workplace has been so disrupted. So with that, I'll introduce my guests to you today, and I have a couple of people who are great at seeing the bigger picture and breaking down complex technical ideas into concepts that the everyday person can understand. And by that, I mean me. So this is going to be a bit of fun. And without any further ado, let me introduce them. So from Swinburne University, we have Dr. Sean Gallagher, who is one of Australia's leading experts on the future of work. Welcome, Sean.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Looking forward to a great conversation.
And I will get that right, Gallagher. So, and also from Swinburne is the man who has brought us all together here today, Project Lead for Applied Technologies, Andrew Roadknight. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi there. Pleasure to be here.
And to round out my trio of guests, we have LiveTiles' very own Renaissance man who loves to explore the concept of future work, our Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer, Simon Tyrrell.
Hi, everyone. Hi, guys.
Welcome aboard, gentlemen. Let's get into this. So I mentioned in the opener that we will be talking about the future of the physical workplace. And I don't want to be controversial here, as there's a whole economy that runs off the back of, building, renting and selling commercial property. But is there a future for the physical workplace, or is what you see here with me at home in my my home office, is that the actual future? I might throw it to you, Sean. What do you think?
I don't think there is actually a more profound question that we should be asking and trying to figure out what's going on at the moment than that one there. I'm looking out my window over to the right there. I'm looking at the CBD of Melbourne. The question you're asking is actually, if you take it a little bit further, the entire business model of the CBD is under threat because why we went to the office all of a sudden is no longer why we need to go to the office. We had these shibboleths about the office that you could only go there. That was about productivity and that you had to be supervised. Well, in the space of a very short period of time, all of a sudden, 88% of Australian companies have some workers and working from home. There's about 4 to 5 million workers who are doing this, and straight away, all the mindsets that were about, you had to be in the office to be productive have gone. And 70% of workers are saying that they are as productive, if not more productive, at working from home, which is fantastic. But what is going on here is that we are only seeing this through a productivity lens, right? Yeah. We're only seeing that working from home is work from a productivity lens, and that CEOs and CFOs they're looking at their P&L at the moment. They we've got a lot of floor space that we don't need at the moment. I'm going to get rid of some of that. But I think we now need to reimagine. Well, what is the purpose of the office? Why do we actually need to come together? And I think that it's about that creativity and collaboration that humans can only do when they're actually in an intimate space together. I like to say that the future of the office is about figuring out the future. And that when we start to reimagine that, the purpose of the office, then it completely changes everything. Just going back to, the CBD business model kind of thing. I think we need to flip from, valuing a square meter based on its productivity to start to valuing a square meter based on what value can it actually be used to create for that organization. So we're in a really, but at the moment, we're still in the productivity mindset. We've still got a long way to go to get organizations to realize that the future of the office is probably never more important.
Yeah, look, Simon, I might throw it to you here. Like, as humans, we crave face-to-face contact, I believe. And to me, what we have right here on these cameras here right now, it feels a little bit like dancing with your sister at a family wedding. It gets the job done, but you'd rather be dancing with, someone else. As someone who's really taken a lot of pride in setting up a workplace for people to go and collaborate, and then, all of a sudden it's just died. Well, what do you think? Do you think you want to get us back into that sort of thing?
Yeah, I agree with Sean. I think it's a really profound question, and I wouldn't want to be in the business model of co-working spaces right now, because I think that you wouldn't know which way to turn, to be honest. I think there's a number of interesting things that are likely to happen here. One is, as Sean said, that you could look at your floor space model now for any large company and slash a significant amount of cost out by simply saying we need less floor space. And we know of customers of ours who are doing that and organisations who are doing that. But I think that does possibly miss the point of what a physically located space does for humans. We are intrinsically social beings. And so we're starting to see conversations around, well, maybe the floor space, okay, maybe it does reduce a bit. Let's face it, a lot of these companies have a lot of wasted space, right?
Yes.
But
particularly given we're going into a recession.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it gets interesting when you start to think about, well, how do you better use that space? And types of conversations I've been having are around, well, it's quite ironic, right? Because we were, I think you probably agree, Sean, the open plan office was an evil thing, and we were going back to that, we need it. It actually, potentially it's flipped where the entire space should be open to just transient, ad hoc coming together, right? And we're hearing from customers that that's what they're thinking about, of repurposing space. But if you think about the amount of money that's been spent on how do we mix the modes of, I remember walking into one of the banks in Sydney with their new building down on the harbour, and the amount of money spent to try and have these collaborative innovation areas, but then we had to have the office stuff and the broker pods. But let's have this cool cafe, and how do we mix all of that? And ridiculous amounts of money spent, when maybe if you just had an open space that could be flexible and used for multiple purposes, you might get more bang for buck. And that's definitely, Chris, what we tried, right, in our Hobart office, was to have a space that was entirely flexible. So I think it's simple things like movable furniture, movable walls, space that can be open, space that can be closed, and the physical workspace for the knowledge worker, the white collar type worker, becomes one where you meet people, you spend time with people, and you are talking about ideas and solving problems, as opposed to sitting at a desk not talking to anyone in a cubicle trying to get your work done. Obviously, that doesn't apply to the blue collar world, right? Where the workplace is often where the work has to be done. But I think for a big majority of the working population and a growing majority of knowledge-based workforce, I don't think we'll see it go, but it's going to change. There's no doubt about that. And that gets in the whole thing about what is the CBD? What's it mean for public transport?
Yeah.
All of those issues. So.
Yeah. Andrew, what are you seeing at Swinburne at the moment?
Well, I think there needs to be a discussion that has to be had around how we use our campus into the future. We've got a lot of lecture theatres, and I think that having big auditoriums of 400 or 500 people seating is going to need to be reconsidered about how we utilise those spaces, given that from an educational point of view, if we're looking at how we transform our workplace with regard to working with students and doing that, then perhaps we need to think about maybe repurposing those spaces to be more collaborative, to be more flexible, so that we can bring students into smaller groups, maybe move those lectures into an online space that we've all been, sort of rapidly adopting, and therefore bringing down the class sizes and becoming a bit more intimate about how we engage with the students.
Yeah, fair enough. Sean, the concept of future work, seems like it's absolutely racing towards us at light speed right now. Back in April, the head of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, commented that the world has seen, it was 2 years of digital transformation inside 2 months. Do you agree with that statement? It seems crazy that it could happen so quickly.
I think it's probably true in many respects, and that sort of digital it's not something that has started from a standing start in a 2-month period. It already had been underway in many respects, but in a lot of cases, it was for many companies and organizations, it was not a core business kind of thing. Digital transformation was something that, we'll deal with it. We'll have maybe a project team or something like that, try to figure out what that means for us. And all of a sudden, I think of an institution, Swinburne University. We did in 4 weeks what would have taken 4 years to put the entire curriculum online. But I think what's really happening here is that it's, it's not so much about the digital transformation, it's the change in work practices and mindsets that are going along with it. All of a sudden, working from home is an accepted thing. I'm not going to see the inside of my office before 2021, and maybe not even then, who knows? But it hasn't impacted my productivity. But I think if you go back to these digital transformations, there are three things that are happening at a very fundamental level. Well, for a start, there's an increase in automation and AI coming in and displacing a lot of jobs. The gig and freelance economy is still going along at a pretty fast pace, where discrete bundles of work can be distributed to anyone on a digital platform. And now working from home is another kind of distributed workforce. And so in many respects, one of the things that I think is interesting is that the gig economy, the freelance economy, for a long time was sort of, it was a bit tarnished. It wasn't as seen as, it was almost like a second class kind of work. But really, what we've done in terms of working from home is exactly a gig and freelance kind of economy, because we're now distributing work through a workforce, through digital platforms, to be done from anywhere. So I think that whole work from home thing is actually going to, in some ways, re-legitimize gig and freelance economy, and as well as the technology changes that are occurring at the same time. And you've got to remember that a lot of companies, they are wanting everything. The number one word in many of them is de-risk. How do I de-risk my future? How do I de-risk my talent supply chain? How do I de-risk the skills that I need? So I'm purely thinking from a workforce at the moment. And so I think that we've now made the case, just in the same way that work from home has shown that productivity works, work from home is also showing that, hey, you know what? We can organize work from anywhere and however we want. And I think that that's going to come back into the fore about having an increasingly distributed workforce, not just the employees on your payroll, but even more broadly than that. So I would, completely agree with what Satya Nadella has said. But you look at the guys that run Atlassian, you never have to come to work ever again. You look at Siemens, for example, the head of global head of Siemens said about the working from home thing. He's got there's a two-pronged policy. One, we don't care about how much time you spend, just outputs. And the second is, we trust you. That is a huge change in the way that we're starting to see work. So, yes, the digital transformation is well and truly that the horse has bolted and left the gates kind of thing. But it's really the change in mindsets that I think are more fundamentally and profoundly occurring.
Two things from that. So, Andrew, 4 years worth of work in 4 weeks, and trust. It would have been a lot of trust put in the team to get that done, wouldn't there?
Absolutely, and I was part of all that. I was taking a unit for the first time, semester 1, and had to change it from being at a face-to-face delivery to online in the space of 2 weeks.
Crazy.
And it was a challenge, but I think there was a lot of trust given to teaching staff across the board that they would step up to the challenge of moving across. I think the university was at least luckily well placed from a digital point of view of having resources available to students and staff. So things like having our Canvas, our learning management system, up and going, having Microsoft products available for staff and students to use both from at home and in a virtualized sense. So that really helped with accessing the learning tools. But certainly we saw a rapid shift of needing to use the collaborative tools like Teams and to get a lot of people upskilled really quickly into that space. And that was a big challenge for a lot of people. But for, perhaps the more digital native people, such as the students, I think that they adopted to it pretty well. Though I think there will be a challenge when we go back to our teaching and learning practices, because of there'll be a varying level of expectations from students about how the content is given to them. But we also need to look at what we are teaching the students as well, from a preparing them for the future of work, in particular subjects based around that topic, because I don't think we can teach them about face-to-face meetings and all those sorts of soft skills that have once been just pretty much the primary thing. But now we certainly now need to recognise that the gig economy, the freelance work, that remote distant learning is all part of what we need to incorporate into the studies moving forward.
Yeah. Hey, so I want to take you back to such as a comment of 2 years in 2 months. It's a pretty massive statement. I just wonder if you can maybe break it down a little bit and talk about some of the different technologies that are sort of seen in terms of digital transformation, what he's referring to.
So I think Sadia was mainly referring to things like the growth and explosion of tools like Teams, right? That particular quote was in reference to Teams grew from around 10 million monthly users to now it's well over 75 million. But I think there is a broader accuracy to that comment. And just picking up something Sean said, I think there's a number of really interesting things. It's not so much what technology has done; it's what people have been forced to do. And one is, Swinburne that 4 years, and having worked with Swinburne, you've never seen a move as fast before. But we saw it. A health customer of ours, one of the departments of health here in Australia. They had a 3-year program of work where they were going to probably land on deploying cloud email, right? It was probably the outcome after 3 years by their own mission. In less than a week, they deployed a new collaboration platform with Teams and got just enormous adoption day one, right? So I think what that's done is it's taken away excuses. And if we think about, particularly in workplace technology, there was all these systems, processes, and the way even budgets were set up was around, okay, we need a very clear plan. We need to de-risk it, as Sean referred to before, and then all it did is introduce excuses, not do anything, right? And everybody talked around the employee experience. Everyone talked about employee engagement. Everyone talked about digitisation and digital transformation. But as Sean said, they just put it in the bucket of, we've got a digital transformation team, but they weren't funded. They didn't, they weren't given the go-ahead to just do stuff. Right, and we saw that all the time across the world in our customer base. Those excuses are gone because everyone's done it, and so now if you're sitting there going, I don't think you're going to sit there now and go, we can't do that, because everybody in that room or on that video call should be saying, why the hell not? We did it before, right? And I think that's exciting for the education sector, to be honest, because it has been laggard in its application of technology to the experience of learning. But it's also exciting for a bunch of other, like healthcare. I mean, healthcare is probably the single biggest positive disruption that will come out of COVID. And a practical example of that is, I just could not believe it when I was able to get blood test results from a GP over the phone, right? What was the reason that didn't happen pre-COVID? It had nothing to do with technology. It had to do with it wasn't bulk billable, right? In Australian context.
Yeah.
So it always did my head in that I had to make an appointment. They wouldn't tell you what your results were. So you're crapping yourself wondering whether there's something wrong with you, only to turn up, sit in a GP clinic, to walk in for 5 minutes and be told, oh, all good, you're healthy.
Yeah.
And the moment that happened in telehealth, so I don't know, Sean, how long are we talking about telehealth in Australia? 10 years? Right.
Oh, longer than that. I was in a previous life. I was an advisor to the Deputy Premier and Minister for Health in New South Wales in the late 90s, and we were talking about telehealth back then.
Yeah, it just happened, right? It happened because it had to, and guess what? People still got care. People still got, got to see their doctors. So I think that's a massive positive. The other thing that Sean, I hadn't really thought about, but I think it has done too, is the trust factor, right? So if you think about Swinburne, they didn't have a choice. It had to trust you guys, Andrew, and staff to get it done. And if we think about pre-COVID, if you talked about the future of work, and I did a search, I was looking for an image today around future of work for something, and everything's a robot touching a screen or something like that. It was all about automation. It was all about AI is going to do this and that, whatever. AI hasn't got us through COVID, right? It's been humans and organisations have become dependent on their human capital for innovation, for adaptability, all those things. And I think what that has intrinsically led to is, I hope, a lot of leadership realising they can actually trust their people just because they can't see them. And if we can sustain that, well, I believe, and to your point, Sean, the productivity benefits will just come, right? Because so much research has been done on, if you trust people, give them the ability to do it, give them the tools they need, they'll get it done and you'll be more productive. And so I hope we see the end of some of the crappy processes organisations have, some of the crappy management and leadership styles that people have, regardless of whether it's done digitally or in the physical workplace. That's what I hope. The flip side of all of this, of course, is this digital transformation has a highly likelihood of leading to isolation. Well-being is a massive focus, which is a good thing, but I think we will see, we know from, increased rates of domestic violence, calls to mental health services, etc., have gone up. I think domestic violence services something like 40% on average across the country and pretty much mirrored elsewhere in the world. So I think there's some byproducts of being too dispersed. Not the lockdown's part of that, which we all hope is not a long-term thing, particularly in Melbourne for you guys. Yeah. But the thing about this is let's hope we shift now to understanding the other side of the coin here, right? Which it's very easy now potentially for people to become isolated. And the other risk I see, and I can't remember the report, I'm not sure if you recall, Sean, but a few weeks ago there was some research published about the average work week in the past 4 months, I think it was, has gone up 4 hours a week globally. So if you think about the average Australian work week of 38, 40 hours, that's 10% increase in the average work week. That is not going to be a good sustainable model. So
I was going to ask the question of you, maybe Sean, who do you think's benefited most from this rapid change? I was going to maybe preempt it and say maybe it's us, the humans, the works that have, but it sounds like it's a bit of a double-edged sword in a way.
In the sense that, do you think technology is going to be the winner out of all of this?
Well, we're talking about those images of the future of workplaces, all about the robots or whatever, but now it's maybe shifted to flexibility in the workplace and the humans being able to do the work. But then on the flip side of that, you've got the people, working 10% more each week and the mental health side of things.
Well, I think that to me, in my former life, I was a scientist, so I try to see things from first principles and looking at what is actually fundamentally changing in terms of the type of work that people are doing. And, there's a colleague of mine who does, he's a senior advisor to large companies in the US, he, at a very senior level. And there's this one food and bev company, top 5 in the world. They've got, hundreds of thousands of employees and food processing plants all around the place. And, they had gone, there's 2 things that major changes that have occurred in terms of work. One is that the 12-month strategic planning cycle is completely gone, right?
Yeah.
And it's not even a 6-month cycle. They have a 21-day rolling strategic review, in the sense that so every 21 days they have the primary course of that they're trying to proceed along, but they have 3 or 4 alternative scenarios that they could pivot to at a moment's notice based on the milestones, whether or not they're going to be achieved. So the type of work that they're doing is increasingly about scenario planning and figuring out the future. And so that is so human. AI is fantastic, but it only looks in the rearview mirror, right? It's only based on data that is, by its virtue, is historic. It can do some modeling, but it can't figure out the future in a very complex environment in the way that humans do. And so I think that increasingly that's why we're going to go to work, is to do all of that, pattern finding, sense making, storytelling, compelling visions around, what it is that we see as the opportunity, trying to understand very complex and moving, rapidly changing environments. The other thing that was interesting about this company is that, they're a food and bev company. And so one of the things that relates to how do you pivot those human skills into a virtual space? And they found that in a space of about 6 weeks, about half of the C-suite became redundant because because they didn't know how to affect decision making in a virtual space. They were very old school. It was all about presence. It was all about all of that.
Reading the room.
Yeah, exactly. All of that. Whereas they didn't know how to operate in a virtual space. So we have to not only, I think that scenario planning and figuring out the future is very much going to be more and more of what we do. But at the same time, we have to figure out how do we do that and build up trust in increasingly virtual environments.
Yeah. Hey, Sean, you're the director of the Centre for the New Workforce, and I understand that you work with business leaders on transforming organisations and that sort of thing. I'm just wondering, how drastically has the landscape changed when you talk about what you usually talk about with them, which is, building sustainable workforces, meaningful careers for their workers and that sort of thing. How do you have those discussions? We're not really sure what this post-COVID world is going to look like.
We don't know what it's like, but I tell you what, the attention has gone up 3 or 4-fold in terms of okay, this is a serious business. I was in a preamble yesterday. I was chatting to Simon, saying that we're working with a leading architecture firm, and I started having discussions with them about 12 or so months ago, and about the future of work. They say, increasingly our clients are coming to us because they want to know what the future of work is like, and we need to figure out how to design for that. And so they sort of engage this, and we're going through some floor plans, and they were showing me some stuff, and I said, what are those? And they said, that's a row of workstations. I said, why do you have a row of workstations in the future of work? And they sort of, well, what do you mean? Of course, that's where people can work. I said, no, you don't need that. And it's sort of like they went away and thought about it, but then COVID happened, and I got a phone call saying, can you come in? We need to talk to you. We're working with a developer who has a very large, hoping to get off the ground development in a CBD on the East Coast, and they're struggling to get tenants to come in. And so the conversation we're having with them is, how can we maybe make designing a future of work space part of the attraction as to why a tenant might actually sign on to this space. So it is absolutely top of mind, because all of a sudden, in many ways, it's caught people by surprise in some respects, because they were sort of talking about it, and it was a nice theoretical kind of concept that they a dinner, almost like a dinner table conversation, right? All of a sudden it's like, we need to actually figure it out and make it real today. And so that's a lot of the conversations that I've been having with leaders around the place.
Yeah. Hey, Simon, Sean mentioned about the C-suite sort of maybe struggling in some ways in this new world.
Are you suggesting something, Chris?
I'm not saying anything about you, but I was just going to throw it out to you, because obviously you've been part of all the plans for LiveTiles in the future, that sort of thing. Do you feel like there's some kind of modern workplace skills shortage that's starting to appear that maybe businesses need to address?
Not starting to appear. It's been around for the last 2 decades, but absolutely. And I mean, I think this is one of the biggest changes that has to happen. Otherwise, we're going to have a workforce in a generation that's just not ready. And I know Andrew's got some very strong opinions on this. We work very closely together. But if you think about, and as I say, this was happening anyway, technical disruption, the pace of change, it's all been talked about. But I think to Sean's point, it was talked about. It was put on the board agendas. It was like, we've talked about that, move on. And then the other side of the coin was, we're just going to hire people who are innovative, right? And I do not believe you are born innovative, and it's a certain mindset, and it's a certain set of skills that you can apply. And so the world is one of ambiguity, right? It's one of adaptability. It's the workplace of the future, regardless of COVID, the next COVID, or whatever. It's going to continue to be a rapid change. Things like that, freelance gig worker economy, which, I know as a company, we started to use that. We've used it for marketing, and we've used it even for some conceptual development. We have a freelancer developer in Silicon Valley right now who we pay by the hour to work on some potential stuff we might think about doing down the track. Why? He needs to work. He's a very good developer, and we catch up once a week for 30 minutes to see what he's going on, right? We treat him like he's basically a member of our team, which I think, to your point, Sean, is a big change, right? Seeing freelancers as a member of a team, and that whole idea of bringing together agile teams for a purpose. And Adidas, I think, was doing this previously as well around some of their shoe design stuff, is they were bringing together the best they could find into a project team for a short period, and that team would disband, and then they'd bring back another one. If you think about all of that, your workers need to be incredibly open to change, incredibly open to different working styles. So all of a sudden, diversity, being able to work within a diverse team of people you never met, is going to be a crucial skill. And so, I think all of this stuff around problem solving, adaptability, dealing with change, an open mindset, problem solving, they're the skills of the next decade. Some workforces were already looking for it. I think lots of workforces now have realised that's what they need, because you can't just say to the owner of a medium-sized company, "I'll pivot." Become the innovator, right? That person needs people around them who can help do that, and while not throwing out the business, right? De-risking. So I think it's a massive change.
I'm going to throw this one over to Andrew. Andrew, I've got a 16-year-old son who struggles to keep his room tidy, but he'll be going to university in a few years' time. And institutions such as yourselves at Swinburne, how are you going to be handling this in terms of trying to create a curriculum around this sort of stuff?
Interesting question. I guess what we want to try and make sure is that what we have on offer for students is relevant, is engaging for them. It leads to what we hope to see being jobs in the near future, in the 2, 3, 4 years ahead, because generally if a student comes into a higher ed degree, they're needing to look 3 years ahead in terms of the job outcomes. And what we can't see, and we can't predict a global pandemic to happen at any point in time. So our programs need to be agile and really pointed when it comes to being able to shift how we have our projects set up and how we get the students through coursework, and really align it to what is happening within that industry where that course sits. So for something like an IT course or something like that within the field that I've been working in, I think we needed to make sure that students had some sort of workplace engagement. They needed to have, whether it was apprenticeships, a traineeship or an internship or something like that, whether it's paid, unpaid, but really focusing on the needs of what is what do we need to make sure that the students need to have in terms of the soft and the technical skills, but also being able to give them problems and guide them through the solving of that, because they don't have the experience of 20 years being a software developer, hitting that workplace and being able to immediately provide impact. So we need to give them the opportunity to learn to fail within the university. And I don't mean fail as in fail units, but I mean to make mistakes, to realise, to learn from them, and be able to then bring that into that learning into the workplace. And hopefully if we can get them paired up with an employer, then that just makes the transition into their work life a whole lot easier. And I mean, that's something that I think that universities and businesses should be looking to try and do a bit more, is if organisations are looking to realign workforce, particularly if they've had to cut back workforce and then they're looking to rebuild, then I think perhaps tertiary educations can help and provide with people who have retrained or people that are training to get into that workforce, an opportunity to step in and help with the rebuild of the organisation, whether it be from a cultural point of view, whether it can be from just the skills point of view as well.
There's no doubt, right, that vocational education, I think even the federal government in Australia has, realised that vocational education has been severely underfunded and not shown enough love for years. So that's a good focus. I just hope they put the attention in the right areas. But the other thing that gets interesting, I think, is this idea that we're saying work is, you could be anywhere, etc. All of a sudden you think about internships, apprenticeships, work placement, right? Which was always about work placement. I'm going to put you, physical body, in this place, right? And it's not scalable because it requires space, it requires, a desk, even just simple stuff, right? Whereas this idea that students could become part of an organisation digitally, right, with no borders, you think about the potential for those students to be exposed to different parts of an organisation, regardless of where those parts may be. So a student could go from working in marketing for a couple of weeks, being part of that process, being in the meetings, being exposed to the projects and decisions, etc. Then the next 2 weeks, they're in a different part. They might be in the supply chain part of the organisation, exposed to that. The potential here to scale their exposure to the real world is huge compared to the old model. And it gets very exciting when you think about it.
It's a bit like now that we are all working virtually. I can work for anybody, anywhere, anytime, as opposed to in the past, I live in Hobart and I'm a business and I need to find the best person in Hobart. I can find the best person anywhere. And it feels like that might be a similar sort of situation for the kids of the world as they're coming through university.
Well, we're definitely looking for podcast hosts.
I was going to ask Sean a serious question, but if you want to go there, that's okay.
I would like to just sort of add in that there is an equity issue with a whole lot of the challenges of this work from home, particularly for young people, is that they may not have the technology or the resources to be able to jump into these sort of workspaces. And that's where a university with campus facilities or a workplace with those facilities be of benefit. So I think that there are certain things that we need to be just mindful of, because personal experience is that in the a games course, they need high-end gaming or games machines to do a lot of the art and do a lot of the rendering and things like that. But not everybody's got $3,000 to put together for a PC and an NBN unlimited. I'll have the money for an NBN unlimited plan if it even works.
Anyway.
So they are challenges that that a lot of students and people working from home are going to need to be really mindful of.
But Andrew, doesn't that raise a massive opportunity, right, where suddenly some university space is freed up to go there, and you could participate in the workforce of Google, right, without ever having to go there. Everything you need is there. The borders to access are gone because it's been opened up. Where you're suddenly working for Atlassian in San Francisco, right? Because you can do it, and what the university becomes is that facilitator of the technology needs, the safe space. Because the other thing I think that we all forget, and I do a lot of work with high school kids. You're talking about some kids here where home is not where you want them to be. Right? And I had a very disturbing session with some kids the other day at a high school where 90% of their problems they were looking to solve with COVID lockdown and learning was how not to be at home. So I think, you're right. We need to remember that not everyone is a white-collar knowledge worker with good internet and etc. But I think there's massive opportunity. Maybe some of that physical workspace that we're going to be offloading into the recession market becomes, access points for that type of stuff. It's a good point.
I might throw it over to Sean to close this out for us. So, the world has changed. Now what? What are you looking forward to in the future of the workplace, and what words of wisdom can you leave us with?
He's going to have to change the name of his centre because it's the Centre for Work now.
Well, actually, that's thanks, Simon. That's actually a really good entree. There's a conference at the moment saying, the future of work, the future is now. I actually think the future is new, and that part of the reason I say that, and it's I'm being a little bit cute because it's not new at all, but it actually is about a reimagining that work should be much more about a collaborative, creative kind of approach and bringing humans together to do that thing. So, we need to move. I think, some of the guys at Atlassian and a few other places are saying, let's stop measuring work in terms of productivity. Let's get rid of that. And because that's actually going to free us up to, to unleash the potential that we all have as humans working together in these collaborative spaces. But, that I was on a call, a little bit before this and, with one of the big four consultancies, and, that we're talking about an opportunity with skills and capabilities for companies, and they said it. Their words, although I would say exactly the same thing. The number one problem that they think in terms of skilling up and capabilities in the workforce is collaborative problem solving. No one knows how to do it properly, and increasingly it's more difficult in virtual spaces. I'd probably go a little bit further and saying it's not just about solving the problem, it's also about finding and framing the problem. That is going to be an increasingly important, it's not even there's skills clearly part of it as capability, but it's also behaviors that I think that we increasingly need to inculcate in all of our organizations. And, in terms of often one of the things companies ask me, well, so what do I need to do? And, and I say, well, there's stuff you can do tomorrow that doesn't cost you a single dime. And number one is, celebrate curiosity within your workforce. Get people to ask, the devil's advocate questions or what if, and to start to, to ask questions. And I think another one is when you're having a discussion with everyone around the table and you're seeking for input, get the youngest person in the room to speak first. Signal to everyone that diversity matters and that everyone's opinion is absolutely equal. And, starting to create an environment in which diversity is not only, acknowledged, but is actually, recognized as being essential to helping solve the,
Sean, do you think, going back to a point Andrew raised, and it came up on the other webinar we did with Swinburne around what Swinburne did with the younger generation of students to help get
older 21s,
Andrew, to understand how to use technology, right? Do you think that we have an opportunity now, because that C-suite is struggling to know how to lead and manage within the current state? Do you think it's an opportunity now where the younger generations in these companies will have an opportunity to be highlighted just for virtue of they'll, I know it's a bit of a stereotype, but they'll know how to work in that mode a lot better and therefore have every chance of being more effective?
Yeah, I think it's yes, but it's a nuanced yes, in the sense that we have to, coming back to seeing it from a diversity lens, we have to figure out how to empower our young workers as change agents within organizations, but at the same time valuing the years and years of experience that our older generation workers have. Together, that's really the mix that you want from a diversity perspective to help figure out the future, right? And so it's not just the younger generation workers, getting out of the way and letting them figure out the way forward. It's how do you also bring your older generation workers along with, and I think that's the conversation that we need to be having, is what does diversity look like across generations in a way that we value the competitive advantage, if you like, that each generation has to bring to the situation.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, we might wrap it up there. It's been an absolutely fantastic chat with the three of you this afternoon. I've certainly learnt a lot as that person in the room that doesn't know as much as your three big brains. It's been absolutely fantastic. Simon, I can see why you and Sean get along so well, because there's certainly some common themes between the two of you in what you.
We didn't argue. That's a disappointment.
No, you very strongly believe in the points you were making there about curiosity and collaborative problem solving is exactly everything that Simon does with the students that he was talking about before. It's a big part of the program with him. So yeah, it's fantastic stuff, guys. I appreciate your time this afternoon. Good luck with the rest of the festival. I think it ends shortly. We're right at the tail end of it. So thanks very much for joining me this afternoon. Sean Gallagher, Andrew Roadknight, and Simon Tyrrell.
Thanks,
Great.
Chris. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, Chris. Thank you all.
Thanks for having us. Take care.